Hey, deserving listeners, you watch with me if you want to. Let's watch.
I told you out of confidence about one of my friends that I had a prior relationship with. You threw that in my fucking face. You disrespected her, you disrespected me.
So just because I brought that up because you wanted me to, no, I need to.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I pointed that out at the time as well, and that was very uncool and is relevant to this conversation. As with Jess, if I were a little birdie on his shoulder, I would say, sure, make those points and understand that this person that you love supposedly is going to be going through something right now, and you could show a little compassion, a little empathy. You know, he could have said, well, if you want to hear a full rundown of all my concerns, I don't know if I need to do that necessarily, but, you know, there was that moment when you, in front of the cameras, started talking about that thing that we won't talk about again, that we agreed off camera that we weren't going to talk about on camera, not because I'm ashamed of it, but because this other person deserves privacy and it is not relevant to our relationship. You know, it was a long time ago. It's not a threat. That's why I wanted you to, you know, all that stuff. You know, that was one of those things, and then this other thing. Having said all that, you know, I don't know what is going on. Like, one of the best things that he could say is, look, from my perspective, when I'm struggling, it's all your fault. But I know it can't be all your fault. I don't know. I don't know if it really matters. But all I know is that after our last fight, well, really, and I don't know if this is true for him, after our first fight, I thought, I don't want to ever do that again. So I tried to work on it, and I tried to work with you. We had that second fight. I thought, okay, this isn't good, because we told ourselves we weren't going to do this again. So I said, I don't want to ever do that again, or else that could be bad. So I did all the things that I thought of, and I think you were too, and we even talked about it. I thought we had made up, and I was optimistic. And then that third fight was even bigger than all the rest, and it lasted longer. And you said you did a lot of things. I don't know, maybe I did too. I don't remember every detail, but that to me says that we're just not made for each other. No matter how much I love you, I just know that it's not healthy for either one of us. And for me, I just know it's not healthy for me. I'm sorry, you know, something like that, right? You're saying it, but you're not just blasting her. I mean, she's, you know, like I've been saying, what I imagine that she suffers from, there's enough suffering for her. You don't have to add to it. You don't have to contribute to it. So just some care could be taken. But I don't know, maybe a lot of people are like, yeah, let her have it. I don't know. That's just not how I choose to live or advise people. He's breaking up with her. If they were going to stay together and he's like, you can't do that. Okay, you can start making those points. Again, there's a way to come across that's more likely to receive understanding from the other person. But if you've already decided you're breaking up and you're telling someone I'm breaking up with you, just have a little bit more care.
So someone that you slept with that made me uncomfortable, I get that you told me in confidence to protect your reputation, but it made me feel a certain type of way. So that's unfair. It's unfair.
Okay.
So that was
less recent than your ex-boyfriend that you still hang out with.
I don't call him, and I don't hang out with him.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Yeah. I get it, but if I were a little birdie in his shoulder, I would say, don't get into a tit for tat. You're breaking up with her. Just roll with the punches. She's going to get upset. She's going to get sad. She's going to get angry. It's sort of like preparing a politician for a debate or something. You're going to hear this. You're going to hear that. What response makes sense to you? And this is differentiation. I have a hard time believing that Jimmy set out to have this style of conversation. Although, who knows? The way he led, maybe he did want to blast her. I don't know. But a hallmark of differentiation that I have to talk about is what the Bowenians will call goal-directed behavior, meaning that you have some sense, maybe not stated clearly in your mind, of a goal, an outcome, an overall vibe of the situation that you would like to have happen. And typically for people in his shoes, they will want to break up. They might have a few things they want to get off their chest, but they don't want to get into a fight. They don't want to get into a tit for tat. They don't want to get into a conflictual argument. And the differentiated individual will have at least a little bit of attention. Okay, this is my overall goal for the interaction. This is what's happening in this moment. Given my goal, and maybe there are other goals too, like I want to stand up for myself. I want to say a couple points like, hey, I didn't like that. But I also don't want her to feel horrible about herself. So, these are all my goals. Given the fact that she just, blasted or made an excuse about that interaction when she was yelling at me about having sex with my friend in the past, and given all that, what do I say? I would think that Jimmy would say, well, it just really hurt my feelings that you did that. I thought we had agreed differently, and if you had a concern, we could certainly have talked about it. We did talk about it, but I don't want to get in an argument with you. It just really hurt when you did that. Instead of tit for tatting, which is, well, you have a da da da. So I think I'm going to sneeze. Maybe not. But anyway, we're hearing another random detail. It doesn't really matter if they're breaking up, but she is still friends with one of her exes, which I will say is a good sign. I speculated earlier wrongly that she might not be friends with any of her exes, given what I imagine her past relationships were like or how they ended. So, I consider it a minor green flag. It's not an indication that someone is necessarily a good partner, but it does indicate that people can break up well enough that they can still remain friends. I think it also indicates that you value connection and closeness, and because when you fall in love or you're in a relationship, typically there's some friendship element to it, and that can be retained. Not always, some people don't want to do that, but I like to hear that. I think I know according to research, people don't have enough friends, and if there was something that connected you to begin with, I think that should be at least considered to be something that you want to hold on to, because it's rare to find someone that you connect with that way. Now, if it's a romantic thing and it hurts to be with them or it's hurting the other person, of course, there's a lot of things to consider. But anyway, so he's tit for tatting.
The first night that we got engaged and we got our phones back, you FaceTimed him.
I said we have a mutual friendship, and I don't see him, I don't text him, I don't call him every day. That is completely different.
So she has accused him again. She was indirectly accusing him during that third fight of texting with this woman friend of his. Now, even if he did that, doesn't mean anything. It just means that he has a friend that he texts all day. It could mean that it is a threat or an affair, or there's some sort of leftover romantic connection of some untoward sort. But just because he has a friend that's a woman, and just because they had sex in the past, that doesn't mean anything in terms of scientific empiricism. It just means that those are the details, and there might not be any threat there. I imagine there probably wasn't a threat there, but maybe there was. I don't know. So, but anyway, she was saying you text her all day long. I have a feeling that isn't an accurate depiction. He didn't refute it really either time, so maybe he feels like he can't defend that. If that is true, he could absolutely say, yeah, I do text her, and a lot of my friends all day. I call them a lot. I would hope that you would call your friends all day. And yeah, this one particular friend that I contact throughout the day, because, I like to joke around with my friends. I like to get support from my friends. I would like to hope that you do as well, even if it is one of your former partners that's currently a friend. And by the way, this friend of mine, we had sex one time, because I think that's what it was. It was some kind of one-off event that happened in the past. But who knows? Either way, he could say, yeah, I do text with her and other friends of mine, not because anything is happening, but because it's normal to communicate with your friends all day long, especially when you're going through a lot, like what we're going through, good and bad, right? So, yeah, I don't see any problem with that. I don't have a problem with you contacting your friends all day long. It's not some nefarious thing. So, he could say something like that. But it's also possible that she doesn't even know what he's doing, and he isn't contacting this woman all day long, and she has invented it. She invented that Jess was there. this would be another one of those things that she could be inventing.
You just like continue to spur things out that like I'm embarrassed of. And
Yes, I did bring it up. Did I apologize for bringing it up in the way I did? Yes, I did. And I'm really sorry that I brought it up on cameras when you asked me not to protect your reputation, but it was my feelings.
So this is a non-apology. I thought it was an apology, but she's following it up with, but my feelings. Look, I'm sorry that I punched you in the face, but I had emotions. So that's just the way it's going to be. I'm mocking. That's not fair. Yeah, it's not fair. We get that on all levels. So, but she is giving a little bit of grace there. And it sounds like they did talk about it, either on or off camera. I didn't, on the edit, see a lot of evidence that she was actually apologizing. But anyway, she keeps saying to protect his reputation. I wonder if that's true. It could be, but it could be a lot of reasons why he wouldn't. I suspected at least one of the reasons was because he doesn't want the entire world to know about, he doesn't want to out his friend. It's a private matter of this other person. Also, you can imagine that he might not want his entire sexual history discussed all the time. He might not have even told his friends or his family that had happened with this woman, and so he might worry about that. Could be like a religious thing in his family or his community that he doesn't want people judging him in a religious manner or something. I don't know. I could also see how he would just not want either of them to start bringing, if they're going to be open and honest with each other the way that I think he wanted to be, and she did too, then they could say, look, there's a lot of things, there's a line. Like when the cameras are here and we're getting into it, if that ever happens again, let's not say everything, let's err on the side of caution. And we all do this, I would assume. Me and my wife do this when we're socializing or I'm talking on this, this YouTube channel. There are certain things that I don't say, even if I haven't explicitly been told by her that she doesn't want me to, say those things, disclose those things, because I err on the side of not disclosing for her sake. I see her doing that for my sake as well. She doesn't have a YouTube channel, but when we're out and about, whatever. So, and I even imagine there's a lot of evidence that she even is careful what she says to her very, very close friends when I'm not around. It's just the two of them talking about something. Like I get the impression that she's pretty careful there as well, and me too. So that trust, right? You don't want to hurt your partner. You want to be careful with that and not break their trust. Now, sometimes that can't be upheld if, for example, she doesn't want him to tell anyone about the fact that she is conflictual with him, then that's not okay. You can't dictate that someone else not talk with their friends. It's potentially another abusive thing. But anyway, so yeah, that's interesting. If I were him, I would just get away from this. We can go back and forth. Point is that I was really, really hurt. Whether I made it up in my mind or not, see, this is me telling y'all like how to say things tentatively, even though it might not feel tentative. It can help to not only recognize that for yourself because you don't really know what's right and wrong because you're swimming in the soup, but at the very least you can give the other person that gift that you aren't 100% sure. You're allowing for the possibility that you're wrong, especially if you're breaking up with someone, because it doesn't really matter. You don't need to establish that you're right, and that it's even true when you're in a relationship, but you're breaking up with someone and you're saying goodbye. So it's not hard to give some leeway there and say, look, I don't know if I just made it up, whatever, but I gave it a lot of thought. And that last fight was so hurtful. I'd been hurt before, but I was so hurt by that, and that was one of the things that hurt me. It just felt like either in the moment you didn't care about my feelings. I know that you do generally care about my feelings, but in those moments it didn't feel that way. I also felt like I was just being accused of things that weren't actual things. I kept trying to reason with you, and the way that I try to do, did I make some mistakes? Yeah, but it just felt like it was doomed from the very beginning, and it was very hurtful. And I just don't have optimism that that's not going to happen again. In all likelihood, it's going to get worse, as it has over the past 3 fights. And I just don't think that this is going to work. Something like that. Instead of trying to win the detail fight.
I want to get married to you, and I needed to bring it up.
It isn't my reputation. I don't care about it. It's hers that I care about. That's messed up for any future guy that she has anything with or anything she wants.
Yeah, it's not, in my world, that's not messed up. But I know that in some worlds that's messed up. Somehow it makes her into a slut or something. I don't know. I don't know if that's what he's saying, but that's just silly. And even if that does make her into a slut, some people are fine with being sluts. They're just like, I'm a slut. Whatever. It's a Victorian notion that somehow being promiscuous is this problematic thing, particularly for women, right? I don't know, but that's their world. But yeah, so I was wondering that, and she kept emphasizing that for your reputation, right? It sounds believable what he's saying. It's like, no, well, we can imagine that he also might be a little concerned about his quote unquote reputation, but yeah, it's mainly for his friends, which makes sense.
Love triangle.
Exactly, like that makes me reluctant to tell you things, and that's a true problem.
And that's what you keep bringing up, so keep going, keep going. What else do I do that you can't see yourself marrying me for? Because
all I'm saying is that night was such a big step back that I can't fathom marrying you after that.
Yeah, that's more in line with what I was saying earlier. It's still not tempered with any kind of care. And this is another tip that I'll say for people that are breaking up with someone. It's a weird, well, I don't know. I have to talk about this because it's not talked about enough. That for those of you who might be breaking up with someone in the future, it can sometimes feel as though, particularly in the moment, I think he's in this mode of, I need to convince the person I'm breaking up with that I'm making the right choice. And or I need to convince them that my reasons for breaking up with them are valid. That is asking way too much. It's such an atomic bomb for the person you're breaking up with, usually, not always, but often. And in this situation, it is for her. It's way too much to ask. You have to prepare yourself for a complete lack of agreement. And when I say it out loud, of course, everyone would say, well, yeah, duh. But in the moment, that's not how people will operate from that place. They will get into it. And that's what it has that look like he's like, understand me. It makes sense, right? So just forego that want. Yeah, it's a similar problem when you're parenting. You're not breaking up with your kids, but when when I work with parents, one of the pitfalls that I'll see them run into is that for some parents, they can't accept a scenario where the child is unhappy with what you're doing regarding structure. Like they can't eat all the cookies in the kitchen, or they have to go to bed at 8 because tomorrow is school day or whatever, or they can't watch a rated R movie. And it'll destroy the parents because the child will be upset and angry or disappointed or sad or something. And the parent will crumble on the inside and give in, or, there's all sorts of symptoms that can happen from there regarding enmeshment and being too permissive, that kind of stuff. And so, with those parents, not every parent, but with those parents, I talked for a long time about how they can build up the mindset and the ability to take a deep breath and say, this is normal. It's okay that this is happening. I don't like that my child is disappointed or sad or upset at me. It goes against my mission in life, which is to make this child happy and preserve our relationship. But if you let that infect your plan, then it'll, in the long run, cause a lot of harm to the child. There's a little bit of harm-ish or negative emotion from the child. To withstand that will save them from a whole lifetime of negative emotion if you just give in or guilt trip, because that can happen as well, right? It's like, I can't believe you're upset at me. You always do this. If you're not differentiated, if you haven't had it modeled to you, there's a lot of bad things that can happen if you, as a parent or a teacher or whenever you're in a place of authority, if you're overly desperate for approval from those that you are working with. And when you're breaking up with someone, it's a similar problem. If you go into it desperate for the person to be okay with it, it can cause problems that make it even worse for the person that you're breaking up with. Because that could be happening for him here. I have been wondering if he does have a complex around guilt. And what it appears to be doing, whatever the motivation is he's basically just blasting her with all these things like, you and you and you. And it could make her feel even worse in the end, right? The role plays that I've exhibited as to how you could break up with someone that would result in them being very hurt, but at the very least, you're showing that you care and you are believing in the other person to some extent, that you're not saying they're a complete piece of crap. So let's hope that he reigns the sin.
I tried.
You know what I think it is? I think it's an excuse.
It's not an excuse.
So you calling me clingy, you saying that I
You were being clingy.
We're getting married. So
Over the last couple
days.
days.
With you the day you called me clingy, it's
Yes.
hard to say that you didn't want to have sex with me anymore and I was the one pushing it on you.
When did I say that?
Who knows? But given the edit, it looks like she either in the moment or has already developed an exaggerated narrative about what we had heard. That day of the first fight that they had, the way it sounded was that she was feeling distant because he was at work, and when they were reunited after having spent time with her friends, she was really wanting to have sex as a way of connecting. There's nothing wrong with that. But given the track record or the in-the-moment interaction, it sounded like he detected a demand, a control there, that he might have said to himself, I would like to tonight, but not right now, or something. Or he would have been in the mood anyway, but when you are given that message of demand without love being there, right, it's natural for any libido to get snuffed out. I don't know. But the way it sounded was that he would like to have sex with her at some point that day, but he was tired. He works all day. The cameras are there. The friends are there. There's a lot happening. And then he, you can imagine that given his personality also, you can imagine he just wanted to chill and just go on Netflix or whatever and just relax for a bit before having to stay on, if you will. And he didn't say anything in the moment, but he agreed because he knew that he suspected there would be consequences if he didn't. And he noted that in his mind of like, this is not ideal that I'm having sex with her when I'm not really in the mood. And he even said later, we need to work on that or something. And yeah, we've been over that already. That's a problem. He could have been misreading it. We don't know. That's why you need a couple therapists to sift through all that sort of stuff and have a lot of mechanisms in place that allow for open communication about that. Because say after a couple therapy with a lot of talk about that, they have a future interaction and it's the same scenario. And he says, okay, so this is one of those moments, honey, where I want to have sex with you, but I'm worried about saying no because I'm worried that you're going to be thrown into a bad mood and it's going to ruin our time. So I don't know what to do right now. Well, let's say that she isn't unreasonable in the moment. He's misreading it. That could be true. It could still be hurtful to her in that moment, right? That he doesn't want to have sex with her in the moment. That can hurt. And the accusation from him of like, I assume that you're trying to control me or whatever, that could also hurt her. And so she could have a hurt reaction, maybe a little bit of anger. That doesn't mean that all bets are off or she's wrong or there's conversation on conversation and understanding and flexibility and valuing other people's boundaries, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so that's the way it sounded to me. And we could imagine, given what we've seen already from her, that she could have invented in her mind this much more exaggerated statement, like, I can't believe that he would be this way, and it, spins out of control in her own mind. Let's rewind that.
We're being clingy.
We're getting married. So
Over
should
the
I
last
have broken
couple
up with
days-
you the day you called me clingy? It's hard
Yes.
to say that you didn't want to have sex with me anymore and I was the one pushing it on you?
When did I say that?
Really? When did you say that?
Well, actually, now that I listen back, it's interesting when the first time. So I did a lot of research in phenomenological research in the qualitative style of research. When you do research, commonly you'll hear about statistical, quantitative research where they'll survey a bunch of people and there's different questions, and then you'll say, on average, people will respond this way because of blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I'm not describing that very well, but you understand that kind of research in terms of in the field of social sciences and psychology. But we have qualitative research as well. It's less talked about. It's considered to be kind of a lesser form of research, but it is not. It just has a different purpose and a different sort of outcome. But I liked phenomenological research because what you do is you interview people and you record the interview and you are asking a lot of questions about their experience. It depends on what you're researching, what sort of inquiry the study is. But like, for example, I conducted a study on seasoned therapists, and I defined that as people with at least 15 years of experience and their experience of difficult clinical moments with clients. And so I interviewed these therapists for 1 or 2 hours and just asked them to recall what it was like for them to go through the difficult clinical moment, however they really define that. And incidentally, about half of them described working with people like her. I don't know if I know her, but in terms of the way people present like her, because people that present like her often will create difficult clinical moments. I've already been over that anyway. Not that it means that these individuals are problematic. It just means that the kinds of interactions you'll have with these people can sometimes, they can cause what we therapists would consider to be a difficult moment. It can be absolutely overcome and dealt with and, be used to help the client. But anyway, so the thing that this research will demonstrate to the researcher is that every time I listen to the audio, I watched a video as well, but every time I listened to the interview, I heard something different. It's like when you watch a movie that you love the second time, you'll see new things. Oh, I didn't notice that bit. Even though, of course, you did notice it the first time, if you're paying attention to the movie, because our brains can't encode or process or deal with all the information that is happening. Plus, everything that we're perceiving is being constantly filtered through our own assumptions and our own point of view. Whereas when you are doing phenomenological research, and incidentally, if you are doing Rogerian, person-centered, client-centered phenomenological therapy, this is also a tenet where they say you want to bracket your assumptions as best you can and put them on the shelf and be completely open. So when someone says that thing that happened to me with my husband last week, it was just terrible. We fought the whole night. Okay, if we filter that little snippet through a typical lens, we start inventing what happened and what it felt like for everybody. But given the language, we have no idea what really happened. It could be anything. And so when you are operating phenomenologically, and of course you can do this in your personal life as well, and it helps in customer service to be this way as well, is to not assume that given the language, you understand what they're saying. So you just keep asking, okay, when you said conflict, what was that like? Tell me more. And if you just go with your assumptions, you can run away with this false notion. And it, as a client or as someone that's talking, it can feel very disconnecting. If you've ever had that experience where you're saying something to someone and then they just go off and you realize, oh, they don't know really what I'm saying. They're assuming that they understand what I'm saying, but they didn't take the time to really understand. There's a lot of therapeutic value. There's a lot of just, functionality to that. Because when like customer service or you're talking with someone you work with, now, of course, we don't have all the time in the world to investigate these things, but a little bit more time, So when I watch this show, sometimes I'll rewind it and I'll see and understand something different. And we just saw that there, that the first time I heard what she said, it must have been filtered through some kind of state or bias that I was having, and I heard a completely different meaning. I listened to it a second time, and I'm like, oh, no, that's not what she said. And it also highlights to me that anything that I think that I am hearing, I have to be very careful and be tentative, because even to myself, if I went back and listened to it, I might disagree with my take, because I am not actually listening, right? I'm listening through a filter. So let's do it a third time.
I tried.
You know what I think it is? I think it's an excuse.
It's not an excuse.
So you calling me clingy, you saying that I'm
You
the
were
kind
being
of girl-
clingy.
We're getting married. So
Over
should
the
I
last
have broken
couple
up with
days.
you the day you called me clingy? It's hard to
Yes.
say that you didn't want to have sex with me anymore and I was the one pushing it on you.
When did I say that?
Right. So hearing it the second and the third time, particularly the second time, what she's saying is basically what he was saying. She's wording it a little different, but yeah, that so her face of astonishment upon the second listen and now the third is, I think, completely rational based on what he has even said on camera. She wasn't exaggerating it the way that I assume. So that says something, right? That I'm not actually listening to her all the time. I'm filtering. So it's good to be reminded of that. So I'm going to try to recognize that. We can never put our assumptions and our filters aside, because then we would just be nothing and blank. You know, as humans, we have to filter through some kind of baseline of understanding of humans, and we based on our own experience. So that's automatic, but we have to be questioning constantly. So let's continue. Let's see what happens.
Really? When did you say that? That you wanted to pull back because I was the one who always wanted to have sex with you and you didn't want to do that? Disrespect.
When did I say that?
The night you called me clingy.
You got drunk and said that I do not want to be here.
You throw in the towel with one issue?
That was not
They just keep going in circles, which is normal for their conflict anyway. But this is different because he's breaking up with her, and it's normal for anyone in her shoes to do what she's doing, to vacillate between, no, you did this too, and how come you're just throwing this all away, and you must have never loved me. Those are all normal things that will happen for people.
Marriage is not easy.
You broke my trust to the deepest degree.
You broke my trust.
I didn't tell the world
bad.
your deepest, darkest secrets.
Your deepest, darkest secrets is fucking your friend?
Okay, continue to throw it in my face. Continue to remind me why I'm making the right decision here.
It's already, listen.
It might help her to have that highlighted. I can't imagine that's even close to the main reason as to why he's breaking up with her. I mean, maybe it is, but I think it's just something that he can easily point to that she can't really defend, which people will do in situations like this. But it might help her, hopefully, to have this highlighted, that she might be able to reflect on that. Yeah, why did I do that? If I can't really justify this in my head, why did I do that? What was going on for me? Do I have a tendency to do that kind of thing? Why did it feel so justified in the moment? And what emotions was I feeling in the moment that made it feel balanced and okay to say those things? You know, it might help. I don't know. She's in therapy, so God knows what's happening. I assume good things are happening.
I was so hopeful for us.
I don't know where I stand.
Yeah, and this is kind of par for the course for him. He was kind of doing this to Jess. Now, maybe he's that hurt and that angry, and he just doesn't have anything left in the tank to show compassion. That happens, and I would understand that as well. I've been pretty strong in my using this as a jumping off point to talk about situations that I have been very close to clinically and personally. And there's a lot of things here that look abusive. If you're in his shoes, even if it's just for this short amount of time, it can be very, very hurtful and very, very scary and very, very anger-inducing. You know, the amount of injustice that is occurring. And you might even say to yourself, I'm bending over backwards. I am giving and forgiving and allowing and doing everything I can to be the bigger person or take the high road. And then when you decide to end, you're just like, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not going to martyr myself anymore. I'm going to say it how it is. And that's just the way it's going to be. I could see that. It's not the way I would like it to go, but I could be convinced if it was something in that direction that it's not unjustified.
Will I ever live? And I reach for the sky. Will I find the ground?
Yeah, I feel terrible. By the way, whoever this is singing, I'm not a fan of the style of lyric enunciation. It feels like a put on. Like, I always thought Dave Matthews, even though a local Seattle hero, was annoying to me in that way. It feels like an affectation of blurring the edges of consonants. Anyway, that's just the thing. But yeah, as I've said before, there's a strong chance that her pain in this moment is one of the biggest, most intense, most all-encompassing pains we've ever seen on this show, or at least up there tied with the most pain we've ever seen. So it would be painful anyway, but for her, it could be so painful, and it breaks my heart. I do know that she eventually lands in therapy, and I'm guessing she gets a lot of support after this, so I'm holding on to that. If I didn't know that, I would feel so bad, and I'd be very worried about her. It's just a tragedy. I've been over it before, but I'll just say it again, that when you go through relational traumas, it is horrible. You have a child, an innocent little child, that is being treated in a way that they have to resort to defenses that are completely unreasonable that they should have to resort to when they're children. It locks in that tendency and those assumptions, and then that trauma or that mistreatment or bad parenting or lack of attunement, whatever we want to call it, when they were young, was bad enough. That's such an injustice on someone's life. But the harm that happens, it causes a lifetime of suffering that the parents could be long gone, and the damage will continue to create damage. It's a tragedy. It's so unfair. It is like, I don't understand how the universe works when that happens to people. Those who are treated the worst as children often, not always, but they often will enter into adulthood with a set of defenses that will sabotage them over and over and over again, giving them more reason to resort to the defenses. And the cycle just goes on and on. It's so unfair. For myself, I was raised relatively well, and I didn't have to do much to manage a happy life for myself, and I didn't have to do much to avoid sabotaging myself to a great extent. How did I get lucky that way? That's unfair. It's completely unfair that happens. So I don't know who I'm yelling at. I guess her parents or whoever, But then again, the parents had parents. It's almost always the case that did a similar thing, and then their parents. So now we can point to societal factors, poverty, oppression, that absolutely can stress out a family and cause exacerbation of issues for parents and thus the children, for sure. And even in the best of circumstances, with all the privilege in the world, if you were raised in a way that was harmful to you, there's a good chance, without intervention or awareness, that you're going to commit the same harm to your children. It's just completely unfair. That for Jimmy, given his presentation, there's a chance that he will be okay. He'll have the normal ups and downs and bumps in the road. But for her, even if she dedicates herself to therapy that is highly specialized for years and years, there's a pretty good chance that this kind of sabotage and suffering will perpetuate over time. I'm not saying it's doomed. I'm not saying I even know what's happening, but I have friends, close friends of mine. Of course, I've worked with a lot of clients where, they're working so hard. Bob, my co-host, he's a therapist. He's been a therapist. We went to graduate school together. He's been a therapist for as long as I have. He is very, very smart and has been in therapy for, 30 years or something or more. And he's a therapist. He understands what sort of therapy he needs to engage in. And he, to this day, he's in his mid-50s, is still sabotaging himself. And I'm not outing him. He'll talk about this on the podcast. And that's just, and he went through tremendous abuse when he was growing up. It's just so unfair. It's such a tragedy. And so that's one of the big reasons why I became a therapist and why I stay a therapist and why I have this YouTube channel. Because if it's one thing I can do to make up for my privilege in this area and many others, is to try to help others. I have that capacity, worked with people like this, and would suffer. I've talked about this before, even in this series, that clients that present like this would, when you get into it, they can really go after you, and they know often how to get under your skin, and it can be very stressful and hurtful. But I believe that to be leveling the playing field or balancing the scales, at least in that direction, But after the session, I get to move on with my personality that my parents gave me and their parents gave them, right? So it's not balancing the scales at all, really, but it's at least going that direction. And so when I see her suffering, I don't know if that's what I'm looking at, but I just see that tragedy, and I know how many people are in those shoes, and I know many of you are in those shoes, and I don't have a silver lining. I don't have some sort of hallmark ending to this rant. It just sucks. It's just wrong. And if there is some sort of creator or designer of the universe, I got a bone to pick with them, because it doesn't make any logical sense. It's just completely unfair. Just completely unfair. Okay, well, I want to remind everybody that everything I'm saying here is completely speculative based on an edit, which of course is well understood, I hope. So I can only hypothesize based on this edited, sometimes manipulated show in terms of the edit and that sort of thing. So, I don't really know what's really happening. I hope that's abundantly clear. It's not my purpose to hypothesize or conceptualize or diagnose or comment directly and confidently about these individuals. What I'm doing is saying, this is a jumping off point for me to talk about the things that I will talk about with my clients or my students or think about in my own life. It's a chance for all of us to reflect for ourselves, so we can't know anything about these folks. And also another reminder to not participate in the bullying of these individuals, even if it's on Reddit or in some other comment section or in this comment section where you're just blasting someone without any sort of care. Always just imagine that the individual is reading it, because they often do for various reasons. These folks are regular people. If you're going to go after one of the presidential candidates or something online, I still think that care should be taken, but there's less of a concern about their mental health or about how they can handle it, because they're professionals on dealing with that sort of stuff. I don't think that means we can just go off on these people, but these individuals on this show, they're just like you and me. They're not like me, because I am online. I have systems in place to deal with that kind of thing. I don't always deal with it well. It's very hard. I think that's human. But anyway, so I think it's important to do that. You can comment. You can even speculate on Reddit or somewhere else and just say, hey, I don't really know. It kind of looks like this way to me, but who knows? Maybe there's more to the story. That kind of stuff I think is fine. But a lot of people really go after these people, call them names, make huge assumptions, diagnose them, and it's hard. It gets under your skin. And plus, it's just a negative thing in your life that I don't think is good for anybody. And I think it's a barometer indication of people struggling. There's probably a more fundamental reason for one's anger that is more central to that person's life than the anger and the judgment that they bestow on some of these folks. So I think it's just like I said, a barometer indication of like, oh, maybe I need to start healing from something. Why am I so angry? Why am I so determined to make these people feel bad, right? So I hope that you're all taking care of yourself in that way. And I see that a lot, and I commend all of you for doing that. And take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.